Learning outcomes. After starting this module, you shall be able to know the different theoretical perspectives or approaches to entrepreneurship, learn the different levels of analyzing these approaches, understand the different theories which can be classified under these theoretical approaches. Introduction. Various theories on entrepreneurship have been developed over the past 5 decades. It is important to understand these theories to better understand the concept of entrepreneurship and to recognize its importance. Any field of study is driven by theory development. As the field of entrepreneurship has developed, research has moved from being empirical to contextual and process-oriented research. According to Bull and Willard, a theory of entrepreneurship is a verifiable and logical formulation of principles that explain entrepreneurship, entrepreneurial activity, or provide normative guidance. Since entrepreneurship is an emerging field, it becomes imperative to have some theories to explain and to understand it. The various theories of entrepreneurship make us believe that entrepreneurship is multidisciplinary. It consists of various approaches to understand the emergence of this new field. There is an existence a wide variety of approaches to formulate a theory of entrepreneurship. Thus, the field of study is very wide. There are not one or two but many theories of entrepreneurship. An assessment of these theories leads us to identify some main theoretical approaches. These are economic approach, psychological approach, socio-cultural approach, managerial approach. Further, these approaches can be analyzed at 3 levels of analysis: micro, individual level; meso, corporate level; macro, global, country level. This classification is not exhaustive, yet it gives a good overview of the main and important theories of entrepreneurship. Table 1 below represents a bird's eye view of these approaches. Table 1 shows 4 main theoretical approaches to entrepreneurship. As you can see in the table, the 4 approaches, that is economic approach, psychological approach, socio-cultural approach and managerial approach, have been given, and row wise it has been shown micro, individual level, meso, corporate level, and lastly macro, global, country level. Next is economic approach, micro level. Entrepreneurial function as 4th factor of production. One of the functions of entrepreneur is organizing the production of goods or services. Some authors consider the entrepreneur's functions as most crucial for economic activity. For some authors, the functions of entrepreneur are similar to those of a manager, or like Mill and Marshall call it superintendent. Thus, the entrepreneur's functions consist mainly of deciding on the products to satisfy human needs, acquiring the required means of production, preparing the production plan, managing the production and marketing process, undertaking the risk involved in this process. All these functions have been considered since Marshall as the 4th factor of production apart from land, labor and capital. Theory of entrepreneur profit. According to various economists, an entrepreneur's function led to the accrual of a type of rent that was different from rent from land, interest from capital and wages of workers. This entrepreneurial rent was called entrepreneur's profit. This rent is considered as a residual rent which according to V. Mangold includes premium for risk, wages for the entrepreneur, entrepreneur's rent derived from the scarcity of people with entrepreneurial skills. The theory based on the premium for risk has been the most popular with authors such as Cantleton, H.V. Mangold, Knight, Killstrom and Lefont supporting it. Theory of occupational choice under uncertainty. This theory tries to explain why some people decide to become entrepreneurs while others prefer not to do so. According to Lucas 1978, this is because there is a difference in the inherent ability in different people based on which they choose to become entrepreneurs or choose some other employment. Gilstrom and Lefont 1979 and Knight 1921 state that the difference lies in the risk aversion of people. According to them, the ability to perform entrepreneurial or other functions is the same in all people. But for a given wage, people choose between a risky and a non-risky venture. People who are not risk averse become entrepreneurs while others become laborers. The wages gradually adjust at a level where the workers' supply is equal to the workers' demand by the entrepreneurs. Minetti and Bygrave 1999 contend that people become entrepreneurs by comparing the subjective returns of becoming an entrepreneur with the subjective returns of performing other activities. If the subjective return to entrepreneurship is considered positive, people choose to become entrepreneurs. Meso-level transaction cost theory. This theory tries to explain the creation of firms based on the transaction cost. The article, The Nature of the Firm, written by Coase, is the most popular on this theory. This theory specifies that it is the transaction cost which determines the management structure of a firm both at the individual level and at the corporate level. Apart from this, the degree of vertical integration of the new firm is also determined by the transaction cost. Frequency of transactions, asset specificity and uncertainty are the main concepts of this theory. Dewey et al. Propose a theory based on dispersed knowledge. According to them, dispersed knowledge leads to heterogeneity of expectations about an uncertain future, which ultimately leads to the creation of a firm. As per an empirical study by Picott et al. 1989, those firms who determined their transaction cost before deciding on integrating certain activities or resources in the firm performed better than those firms which did not do so. Further, it was also found that firms created by a diverse funding team with a management background considered transaction cost more than just a single entrepreneur with a technical background. Next is macro level. Schumpeter's theory of economic development. Schumpeter's theory of economic development is the leading theory on entrepreneurship. His contribution lies in the definition of entrepreneurship and economic development. According to him, an entrepreneur is one who carves out new combinations of the factors of production. The entrepreneur may be independent or dependent, that is, an employee of a company. But the moment they start to manage the business that they have set up, they become managers and cease to become entrepreneurs. The main function of entrepreneur in carving new combinations of the factors of production leads to a new production function. These new combinations are facilitated by changes in technology. Finally, they lead to profit for the entrepreneur, which results from his innovative ventures. Apart from Schumpeter, Shane 1996 in his empirical study has confirmed a positive relationship between technological change and the rate of creation of new firms. Next is theory of endogenous regional development. But the theory of endogenous growth starts with Romer's growth model 1986. This theory talks about the spillover effect. This model specifies that new investment leads to a spillover of knowledge outside that company, leading further to improvements in productivity in the entire industry and region. The spillover effect is a result of investment in human capital, physical capital and R&D. Though the initial models did not explain the methods by which spillover of knowledge takes place, nor did they explain the characteristics of the region in which such spillover is possible. This was done in later models such as the one by X et al. 2005. They link the R&D generated knowledge with commercialization and economic growth. Next is psychological approach, micro level traits theory. This theory is radically different from the economic theory. Here the focus is on the entrepreneur himself. There are two aspects of this theory. First, the psychological traits of the entrepreneurs are compared to non-entrepreneurs. Second, the psychological traits of the successful entrepreneurs as compared to the non-successful entrepreneurs. The aim of the theory is to find the traits that distinguish entrepreneurs from non-entrepreneurs and the traits that distinguish successful entrepreneurs from the non-successful entrepreneurs. Lot of studies has been done to find out the traits of entrepreneurs. Though the results are not consistent, yet some important traits can be mentioned. As per Vienna 1989, some of the important traits are need of independence, need for achievement, internal locus of control, risk-taking propensity, tolerance of ambiguity. Understanding of the traits peculiar to entrepreneurs and especially successful entrepreneurs is important since during analysis of a new project, the traits of the entrepreneurs assume greatest significance. Next is psychodynamic theory. The psychodynamic theory of the entrepreneur personality has its origin in the work of Collins and Murray. It has been further developed upon by Katz de Veres. It is, however, of a negligible importance in the theory of entrepreneurship. At the macro level, Kurzner entrepreneur theory. Kurzner entrepreneur theory focuses on one most important attribute of an entrepreneur, that is alertness. According to him, an entrepreneur is alert to information rather than being in possession of information. Like Schumpeter, Kurzner also emphasizes on the importance of entrepreneurship in the development of the economy. Kurzner states that the markets are imperfect and in disequilibrium. This leads to various market opportunities. The entrepreneur pushes the market towards equilibrium, though they never achieve equilibrium. Though Kurzner talks about economic development, yet the theory is based on one specific characteristic of the entrepreneur, that is alertness or the ability to find business opportunities. Due to this emphasis on the attribute of the entrepreneur, this theory has been classified under the psychological approach and not the economic approach. Next is socio-cultural or institutional approach. The socio-cultural or institutional approach basically states that the decision to become an entrepreneur is determined by external or environmental factors. Macro level, marginalization theory. According to the marginalization theory, it is an event, usually a negative event, that triggers the setup of a new venture. According to some studies, a new venture is not started as a result of a deliberate decision but as a result of a major event in the life of an entrepreneur. Collins and Murray call it role deterioration and Shapiro calls it trigger events. Such a major event creates uncertainties in the life of a person and that person starts to think about setting up a new firm for himself. This has also been tested empirically and it has led to the theory of social marginality. It has been found that such people who face such major life events may be drawn from cultural, religious, ethnic, migrant, minority groups, workers with low wages or unemployed people. Setting up their own venture can be a method of gaining social acceptance for such people. Next is role theory. This theory explains the reasons for an abundance of entrepreneurial activity in certain geographic regions. The idea of setting up a new firm appears to be more believable if there are facts, that is, examples and proofs in front of people. Such examples are large if in a region there is a huge amount of entrepreneurial activity. Thus, in industrial regions where there is entrepreneurial activity, a large number of new ventures are created. On the other hand, in those regions where such activity is not present, the number of new ventures created is low. For example, the Silicon Valley in the US and the industrial clusters in Catalonia or in North Italy are well known for entrepreneurial activity. Next is network theory. Network theory is based on the premise that entrepreneurship needs a network of relationships and social contacts in order to survive. The network is built of relationships between the entrepreneur and other entities such as customers, suppliers, banks, public agencies, private agencies, family members and friends. This network of relationships either favors or constrains a new venture. This relationship may be regarding exchange content, the exchange of goods and services, Communication content, exchange of information. Normative content, expectations from each other. The relationships between the entrepreneur and resources and opportunities may be strong or weak. This depends on the frequency, level, and reciprocity of the relationship. However, the network theory is criticized by some authors as placing too much emphasis on network of relationships and underscoring the value of the business idea. Next is meso-level network theory. Network theory can also be studied at the meso level or corporate level. It can thus be related at the individual level or the institutional level. At the meso level, networks are seen in the form of strategic alliances which are considered to be an intermediate or hybrid form of management. This form a part of business strategy and transaction cost fields of study. Next is incubator theory. This theory states that the characteristics and even the number of new firms depends on the existence of certain organizations such as universities, research centers or industrial enterprises. These organizations have been instrumental in incubating many of the new ventures as the entrepreneur had been working in one of these organizations. For example, in Michigan, 84% of the new firms produced products or services which are related to the organization in which the entrepreneur was previously employed. The location and size of the incubator organization have an impact on the new ventures. Larger organizations appeared to have incubated lesser new ventures as compared to smaller organizations as per a study by Cooper 1973 and Johnson and Cathcart 1979. These incubated firms are also called spin-offs. Next is evolutionary theory. Evolutionary theory talks about economic development and change. This has been propounded by Nelson and Winter, and they call it the new Schumpeterian approach as it is an extension of Schumpeter's theory. The basic premise of this theory is that organizations have difficulty in handling change. They are better able to handle self-maintenance in a stable environment. They function on the basis of routines. Routines refers to all predictable processes in a firm such as production routines, hiring and firing routines, advertising routines and even innovation routines. These are the reason for resistance to change in an organization. Evolutionary theory looks at the following issues: variation, creation of new firms; adaptation, modifying the organization in response to changing situations; selection, circumstances that lead to survival; retention, imitation of successful ventures. Macro level. Weber's theory of economic development. Max Weber was the first author to talk about socio-cultural approach in his book The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalization in 1905. He stated in his book that religious beliefs had a strong influence on the behavior of the entrepreneur. This explains the cause of abundant entrepreneurial activities in those regions where the Protestant ethic was followed. The concept of calling was important since it meant that it was the duty of a person to perform his best as the duty towards God. Another concept is that of asceticism that emphasizes hard work and avoiding conspicuous consumption. Cochrane has also stressed on the impact of cultural factors on entrepreneurship leading to economic development. Next is theory of social change. This theory states that social factors are an important influence on entrepreneurship. These social factors include the degree of mobility, both social and geographical, and the nature of mobility. Though some authors state that a high level of mobility influences entrepreneurship, others state that it is the lack of mobility that influences entrepreneurship. According to Hagen, this is called relative social blockage. This means that only some routes of mobility are blocked. Upward mobility through entrepreneurship is still possible for individuals. However, currently, this theory is considered as part of institutional theory. Next is population ecology theory. According to this theory, the birth, growth, changes and death of new organizations depend on the environment. This theory is inspired from biology and developed in sociology. The basic assumptions of this theory are: inertia makes the existing organizations unable to change. New firms are formed as a result of environmental changes. Creation and dissolution of organization leads to changes in organizational population. New firms are therefore formed based on previous foundings, mortality rate and organizational density. Next is institutional theory. This theory is considered to be most consistent and appropriate theoretical framework to study entrepreneurship. According to this theory, institutional factors have a major bearing on new venture creation. The term institution assumes a very broad definition in this theory. It includes formal rules as well as informal rules. Formal rules consist of various laws. Informal rules consist of various norms and conventions. The theory further states that though formal rules are obviously complied with, it is the informal rules and conventions that influence all behavior. Next is managerial approach. This approach stresses on the economics and managerial aspects of new ventures. The fields of economics and business administration and the process of decision making becomes the chief point of discussion under this approach. Micro level. Libestin X efficiency theory. Libestin theory explains that an entrepreneur has a very critical function to perform in economic development. This important function, according to him, is being an input completer. For example, if 5 inputs are required, it is not enough to locate and use only 4 of them. Thus, according to Libestin, an entrepreneur needs to perform 4 major roles. These are: A. Connecting different markets. B. Making up for market deficiencies, the gap filling capacity. C. Input completing. D. Creating or expanding new ventures. Thus, the entrepreneur needs to perform these tasks, which are essentially management tasks. Next is behavioral theory of the entrepreneur. Whereas the psychological theories focus on what the entrepreneur is, the behavioral theory focuses on what the entrepreneur does. The former thus talks about the traits that are difficult to change, but the latter talks about skills which can be learned. This helps to provide guidance to potential entrepreneurs in the process of creating new ventures. The behaviors of the entrepreneur or the tasks performed by the entrepreneur are the management functions performed by him. The functions considered the most important amongst them being the ability for searching and gathering information, identifying opportunities, handling risk, learning from experience. Next is models of new enterprise creation. According to Gartner, a new venture is the result of 4 variables: individual, process, environment and the organization itself. Another model by Venezia specifies new venture creation in 4 phases. Phase 1, gestation. This phase includes factors such as the role of the incubator firm and critical events which lead to the decision to create a firm. Phase 2, creation. This includes identifying opportunities, creating a network, preparing a business plan and formally creating the firm. Phase 3, launching. Organizing the production factors and launching the product or service are an element of launching the business. Phase 4, consolidation. Includes redefining the business according to changes in the environment. Next is modes to becoming an entrepreneur. Apart from creating a new firm by an entrepreneur, there are some alternative modes to becoming an entrepreneur. These are taking up a franchisee, purchasing an existing company by the management and inheriting an existing family business. Next is meso level. Models of new enterprise, success and failure. Various models try to explain the factors responsible for the success or failure of new firms. These could be psychological traits, environmental factors or other managerial factors under the control of the entrepreneur. The main factors which have been identified by various authors in their models are characteristics of the entrepreneur, example past experience, management functions performed, the product or service, the industrial sector, the initial strategy adopted, financial factors. Next is corporate entrepreneurship. Corporate entrepreneurship is considered by some authors as a distinct field of study. Due to rapid technological changes and globalization, organizations also need to seek new opportunities and develop new products or services. This is known as venture management or corporate entrepreneurship. It can be defined as an activity in an organization whose aim is to identify new opportunities beyond the core business or generating new business for the organization. These are in fact highly strategic issues faced by corporate today. Thus, there is a close relationship between corporate entrepreneurship and the field of business strategy. Corporate entrepreneurship synthesizes the insights gleaned from all approaches to apply it to developing the entrepreneurship spirit in large firms. Now, let us summarize. Entrepreneurship is a very vast field of study. It consists of various theories that look at entrepreneurship from different perspectives. This can, however, be classified into four broad approaches: economic, psychological, socio-cultural and managerial. Further, all these approaches can be looked at three levels, namely micro, meso and macro. The economic approach looks at entrepreneurship as contributing to economic development by being the fourth factor of production. It also states that individuals differ in their risk aversion, which affects why some individuals become entrepreneurs and why some don't. Most notable among the theories is that of Schumpeter. His contribution lies in the definition of entrepreneurship and economic development, which is followed till date. The psychological approach states that an entrepreneur has a different psychological profile than others. Different authors have attempted to describe these psychological traits of entrepreneurs. An important psychological trait is his alertness to information. The socio-cultural or institutional approach postulates that external or environmental factors influence the decision to become an entrepreneur. There could be some negative events or some role models in the environment around them. A strong network of relationships or an incubating organization can also be facilitators. Finally, the managerial approach looks at entrepreneurship from the perspective of management functions that are performed by the entrepreneur. The modes of becoming an entrepreneur or entrepreneurship as a part of business strategy within a firm instead of an independent activity. Thank you.